Last month, I spent a couple of days exploring Kaiping, and what really drew me there was its famous old town Chikan, ancient town, often called the Museum of World Architecture. With more than 350 years of history, it started out as a traditional Chinese town, but about 100 years ago, it began to mix Eastern and Western influences, creating a fascinating blend of Gothic, Baroque, Southeast Asian, and traditional Chinese styles. Strolling through its streets feels like stepping through different times and cultures. The whole experience gave me a deeper appreciation of the town's incredible history. For me, Chikan Ancient Town feels both familiar and unfamiliar. It's my hometown, the place where my parents were born and grew up. Even though I wasn't born there myself, I grew up hearing stories about it from my elders, so I always had some idea of what it was like. I'd visited a few times before as a tourist, but back then the town was pretty run down, with lots of old houses falling apart. In June 2007, Kaiping Dialo and Villages was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List, and in recent years, the area's been restored and turned into a tourist spot. That's why I decided to go back to experience its unique blend of architecture and relive a bit of its past glory. This trip really gave me a deeper appreciation for my hometown's rich history and culture. When I arrived at Chikan Ancient Town, I could tell the restoration work was done really well. The old buildings have been beautifully preserved. Of course, there are some new touches for tourism, like fancy hotels and large performance venues, which give the place a bit of a commercial vibe. But I guess that's part of the trade-off. Even though the ancient town has now become more of a resort, I personally feel it's missing some of its old spirit. You can admire the building's exteriors, but it's hard to sense the everyday life of the locals. Still, it's much better than letting this once thriving town fade into history. At least now it's found a new kind of energy, drawing visitors to discover and appreciate its rich past and culture. Although my time in the ancient town was short, this trip really deepened my understanding of its past. Chikan Ancient Town isn't just known for its unique architecture, it also carries the history of Chinese laborers who once sold piglets to work overseas. Maybe because it's my hometown, I've always held on to the stories my elders told me when I was a kid, along with bits I picked up from movies and books. After this visit, I started digging deeper into its history through different sources, and I'd love to share some of what I discovered. If you're interested, stick around. I've got a fascinating story to tell. During the late Qing dynasty, corruption was widespread, and the empire was struggling with both internal turmoil and foreign aggression, leaving ordinary people to suffer greatly. Many families from northern China were forced to move south in search of survival due to political and economic pressures. Life in Kaiping and the surrounding regions was already tough, and the arrival of northern migrants made resources even scarcer. As people competed for limited living space, ethnic conflicts broke out multiple times, one of the most notorious being the Tuk Xiaodo, or clashes between locals and immigrants. The term Tu referred to Kaiping's original residents, while K meant the newcomers from the north. During the late 19th century, gold mines in places like America and Australia sparked a huge demand for laborers to work in mining and railroad construction. As the African slave trade was gradually outlawed, Chinese workers became the go-to cheap labor force. Because Kaiping was close to major ports like Hong Kong and Macau, it became a primary source of these workers. In fact, Hong Kong and Macau turned into key hubs, where over 300 labor recruiting agencies operated, known as Piglet depots. During the peak of the trade in the late 1800s, these depots would lure poor farmers' children with promises like, go to the gold mountain, earn gold bars, get rich fast, or it's easy work as a laborer. Many were deceived, and even those who suspected it was a scam often had no choice but to sign contracts called selling oneself agreements. that effectively sold them into forced labor overseas. This cruel era of selling piglets is a dark, tragic chapter in Chinese history. During the peak period from the 1,850 seconds to the 1,890 seconds, the faced selling piglets trade saw thousands of Chinese workers sent overseas through piglet depots. Although it was called selling oneself, those who left never saw any money. Instead, they ended up owing large debts to the depots. Before departure, they usually signed official-looking labor contracts, but in reality, these workers were trapped by heavy debts, covering expenses like travel, introductions, and lodging. The middlemen behind the trade created complicated fee structures that placed a crushing financial burden on these laborers. This system essentially enslaved them, turning a desperate search for a better life into years of forced labor far from home. After signing the selling oneself contracts, these Chinese workers lost control of their lives and could only silently accept their fate. They were forced onto ships, usually converted cargo vessels, with barely any space to live. Once on board, most were crammed into the lowest cargo hold, packed tightly together, forced to sleep on the floor day and night in terrible conditions. The hold was dark, airless, and filled with a foul stench. Food was scarce and of poor quality. Fresh water was limited, and hygiene was almost non-existent. Sick passengers received no medical care. When deadly diseases like dysentery and cholera broke out, panic spread throughout the hold. The sick and dead were often thrown overboard into the sea. The voyage could last weeks or even months, during which these laborers lived in complete isolation, losing themselves in the darkness, clinging only to memories of home and hopes for an uncertain future. After months at sea, surviving Chinese workers finally reached destinations in the Americas, Australia, or Southeast Asia. But instead of a fresh start, they faced another harsh reality. Upon arrival, intermediaries or foreign companies immediately assigned them to grueling labor jobs. Bound by their selling oneself contracts, which typically lasted 5 to 8 years, they had almost no freedom to leave. Most were put to work on plantations, mines, railroads, and docks, facing extremely tough and dangerous conditions. The long hours and intense labor wore them down physically and mentally, while the hazardous work environments, especially in mines and on railroad sites, lacked safety measures, leading to frequent accidents and deaths. This forced indentured servitude marked a dark chapter of exploitation and suffering for these workers far from home. During their labor contracts, a large portion of Chinese workers' wages was withheld by the intermediaries to cover travel costs, introduction fees, and various other debts. As a result, many workers ended up with only meager pay, often not enough to meet their basic living needs. Exploiters took advantage of the workers' vulnerable positions and language barriers to keep piling on debts, trapping them in a cycle of debt slavery. The living conditions were terrible. Cramped, overcrowded housing with poor sanitation, limited food supplies, and scarce medical care. On top of this, the workers faced racial discrimination and were socially marginalized, holding low legal status that made it nearly impossible to stand up for their rights. Over time, the toll of illness, exhaustion, and psychological stress was heavy, and many did not survive until their contracts ended. Most of the wages these Chinese workers earned went toward paying off debts. After intermediaries took their fees, the workers were left with very little, but they still worked tirelessly to save money. They sent their savings back home to support their families, paying for basics like food and household expenses. For many families, these remittances became a crucial source of income. The money flowed through a complicated network involving Chinese community organizations, agents, and postal services, creating a complex web of cross-border transfers. Funds sent from places like the Americas, Australia, and Southeast Asia often passed through multiple hands before finally reaching their hometowns in Guangdong. As a large number of young people from the Kaiping area went abroad to work, the hometown was left mostly with the elderly, women, and children. Life for these left-behind families was full of hardships and challenges. The families that remained mainly worked in farming, aquaculture, and handicrafts. Women had to juggle field work along with household chores, taking on all the agricultural and financial responsibilities. The elderly struggled to maintain their livelihoods while caring for the children and handling minor tasks. Overall, there weren't enough able-bodied people to share the workload, which led to poor living conditions and food shortages. Many women became left-behind wives, enduring the pain of not knowing how their husbands were doing far away while facing long-term financial struggles. Their hearts were full of longing for their husbands, but they had to quietly shoulder the burdens of daily life. The elderly worried day and night about their children working overseas, painfully waiting for their return. Even though family bonds grew stronger during this time, the constant hardships and struggles tested their strength and resilience. After many years, the selling oneself agreements, signed by numerous Chinese workers, finally expired, allowing them to repay their debts and gain freedom. At this point, they could choose to leave their jobs or continue working where they were. Although their incomes remained modest, they kept saving diligently, sending money back to their families and trying to secure their futures, whether that meant returning to Kaiping or living abroad. Some Chinese workers started small businesses, usually in industries with low startup costs like grocery stores, laundries, and restaurants. These ventures required little capital but offered a way to improve their economic situation. As they became more financially stable, they sent larger remittances back home. These funds didn't just support their families' daily needs, they also helped develop the economy and public infrastructure in their hometowns, like building roads, schools, and hospitals. In doing so, they played a key role in promoting community growth and modernization in Kaiping. With the flow of remittances, the lives of some overseas Chinese families improved significantly, and capital began to build up. However, the Kaiping area still faced serious threats from bandits, which caused social unrest. Since many young men had gone abroad to work, the villages were mostly left with women, children, and the elderly, weakening the community's ability to defend itself. Bandits often raided villages, committing robbery and kidnappings, and even attacked schools, posing serious dangers to the safety and property of the families left behind. Facing constant threats from bandits, villagers in Kaiping began pooling their resources or using funds sent by wealthy overseas Chinese to build watchtowers. These structures were designed primarily for defense, featuring thick walls, small windows, and firing holes that allowed villagers to take shelter and collectively resist bandit attacks. Beyond protection from bandits, the watchtowers also doubled as flood shelters, providing safe refuge during frequent water disasters caused by the region's low-lying terrain. Built during times of social unrest, these watchtowers symbolized both resilience and the community's efforts to safeguard their homes and lives. These watchtowers, known as diaolu, blend traditional Chinese and Western architectural styles, reflecting the identity and wealth of the villagers who built them. Beyond serving as defensive structures, they became powerful symbols of survival, family protection, and community unity. Towering over villages, the watchtowers embody the resilience and bravery of the locals, giving each family a sense of safety and hope amid hardships. In Kaiping, these watchtowers stand not only as tools of defense, but as monuments to the collective spirit of the villagers, a united front against adversity, and a shared determination to face the future together. As the residents of the Kaiping region settled into more stable lives, remittances from overseas Chinese brought growing prosperity. Both returnees and those still abroad regularly sent money home to build houses and develop their communities. Having lived in Western countries, many wanted to incorporate Western architectural styles into their hometown buildings. Since it wasn't practical to hire Western craftsmen locally, they brought back architectural plans and details from abroad. With the help of knowledgeable overseas Chinese or returnees familiar with Western architecture, they adapted and blended Gothic, Baroque, and classical Roman styles into the local designs. This fusion created the unique style of the watchtower, reflecting a confident blend of Chinese tradition and Western influence. Although professional engineers were rare at the time, overseas Chinese contractors and local craftsmen worked closely together to build the watchtower. Using verbal instructions and hands-on collaboration, they developed a unique construction approach, without formal blueprints or strict engineering plans, yet remarkably effective. Local artisans skillfully blended exquisite, traditional Lingnan craftsmanship, like clay sculpture, wood carving, stone carving, and brick carving, with Western architectural influences. This fusion gave rise to the distinctive Kaiping watchtowers that stand today, combining both artistic beauty and sturdy functionality. The design of these watchtowers also considered the subtropical climate and practical urban needs, leading to the widespread use of qilu structures. These arcades provided pedestrians with natural shade and cooler walkways by shielding them from harsh sunlight, greatly enhancing comfort on the streets. The continuous rows of qilu formed dense urban blocks that facilitated smooth traffic flow, easier pedestrian movement, and convenient goods transportation. This architectural design contributed significantly to the vitality and livability of everyday life in the community. These qilu buildings showcase the unique regional character of Kaiping while highlighting the creativity and ingenuity of overseas Chinese architects. Though similar arcade-style buildings exist in the West, they are relatively rare, making the continuous streets of Qilo in Kaiping especially remarkable for their charm and historical significance. As the county seat of Kaiping, Chikan experienced its golden era of architectural development during the 1920s to 1930s. Most of the distinctive kilo and dialo that still stand today in the town were built during this period. The influential Quan and Situ families were major investors, constructing numerous impressive buildings that skillfully blended Chinese and Western architectural styles. These structures not only displayed their wealth and status, but also shaped the unique cultural and historical landscape of Chikan, marking it as a prominent center of overseas Chinese influence and local prosperity. Chikan, the county seat of Kaiping, once flourished thanks to its strategic location along the Tanjiang River. At its peak, over 600 qilu buildings stretched along a 3-kilometer riverside, forming an impressive and continuous arcade street. These structures combined elements of Baroque, Gothic, and traditional Lingnan architectural styles, creating a richly diverse yet harmonious streetscape. This made Chikan one of the densest and most stylistically unique qilu areas in all of China. Starting in the 1930s, as highways and modern transportation developed, water traffic wasn't as important anymore, and Chikan began to lose its status as a major river port. With new highways boosting growth in places like Sanbu, Chikan's role gradually got replaced. It got hit even harder when the Kaiping county seat moved away from Chikan, taking the town's position as an administrative center and letting its economy and population slip even further. On top of that, the chaos of the War of Resistance against Japan, all the political turmoil in China, and changes in the economy led to a huge wave of people and money leaving the area. With less investment and lots of houses falling into disrepair, this once booming ancient town slowly drifted into decline. In recent years, as awareness of cultural heritage preservation has grown, Chikan Ancient Town has once again drawn wide public attention. The local government and professional restoration teams have launched a series of conservation projects dedicated to preserving the original appearance of the Qilu streets and Diaolu buildings. They have repaired damaged facades and structural elements while carefully retaining Lingnan architectural details and the unique overseas Chinese style. Meanwhile, Chikan has been included as part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site Kaiping and Villages, further elevating its historical significance and global recognition. Beyond restoration efforts, Chikan has embraced revitalization. Many of the old Kilu buildings have been transformed into cafes, cultural and creative shops, exhibition spaces, and boutique guest houses. This has attracted young visitors and travelers eager to rediscover the town's charm. Its picturesque streets have also become popular filming locations for movies and TV dramas, bringing fresh cultural appeal and boosting Chikan's economic vitality. Once silenced by the decline of river trade and the turmoil of war, Chikan is now experiencing a vibrant rebirth, preserving traces of its rich past while integrating modern cultural life. Walking down its carefully restored Kilu streets, visitors can still feel the glory of the overseas Chinese era alongside the renewed energy of today's town. This harmonious blend of old and new creates a captivating atmosphere that makes Chikan Ancient Town truly unique.